I'm Vicki Phillips. I have the privilege of being the director of the College Ready Strategy at the Foundation. And as you guys may know from what you're hearing and seeing, we spend a lot of time talking to and thinking about teachers. And sometimes I think about who was my most impactful teacher, and it was actually a teacher named Miss Marjorie, who was the hardcore head teacher of a poor elementary school I went to where I grew up near Falls of Rough, Kentucky. And Miss Marjorie was the kind of teacher who would bop you on the head when you weren't paying attention. Back in the days when we admired that sort of thing. But she also made sure that, you know, we really knew our stuff, and she cared enough about me and the other kids who came from poor backgrounds in that school to really push us to do well and to succeed. And when I went to high school, people knew I knew the content, but they also knew I'd gained respect for my peers and accountability for myself and the ability to respect my classroom and my teachers and to be punctual and all those other things that we value. So I think of her a lot, and I think about what would it be like if she'd had the kinds of tools and expectations and things that we're setting and aspiring for teachers today, because I know she would have made sure that every kid thrived in that kind of environment. And I have the privilege of having a couple of what I think of as master teachers on the stage with me today. So Tim, as you may know, is a founding partner of first the New Teachers Project and now Ed Navigator, and just a consummate caring professional around teachers, a consummate sort of teacher and trainer himself, and a good student of both policy and practice. And then Kelly, math teacher and instructional coach in Hillsborough, but she has always also had the privilege of sort of being a fellow, so she's seen a lot of work across the country and can put on both her Hillsborough hat and her hat in relation to how other teachers across the country might be perceiving this work. So I wanted to take us back in time a little bit, not all 15 years, but at least to 2009, when TNTP published that influential study called the Widget Effect. And I wanted you to sort of remind us all what it was like then and what you found, Tim.
That work built on work that had been going on for a couple of decades already, and some of it led by folks in this room. I think the fundamental dynamic was that you had this growing research base that showed the importance of teachers and that teachers varied widely. And then on the other hand, you had this culture in classrooms where we treated teachers as interchangeable, and we seemed to notice very few of those differences. We seemed to act on very few of those differences, so we weren't able to help teachers get better, and we were not able to elevate the quality of instruction overall. And I think it bears mentioning that by 2009, one of the effects of NCLB was that students were being tested annually in grades 3 through 8. And Secretary Spellings is here with us today. That meant that across all 50 states, you had this outpouring of research that made undeniable what was sort of a debatable proposition even 10 years before, and I think validated stuff that a lot of folks in the room had been talking about, which is that if you're a low-income student in America, the likelihood of you getting a fair shot at the best teachers was really low, and it showed in our results.
And Kelly, you were in the classroom. Take us back and tell us a little bit about what the evaluation performance system was like for you then.
Sure. My first year of teaching, it was a very simple check the box kind of thing. There was 3 categories. I did it, my principal did it, turn it in, and we were done. And it was very dissatisfying. I was unhappy with the feedback I was getting. I was told, oh, you're doing a great job, you're fine, but I was a first-year teacher. That's not okay. So that was something that I've seen change, but we still have a long way to go. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the MET project, and that in itself transformed the way I was teaching because I had to watch myself through video. So through that process of watching the video, responding, reflecting, and also using the student surveys has really changed the way that I look at my teaching skill set and others in my department. From there, we moved to a much more intense evaluation system that uses different domains. We have, I think it's 4 different categories we can fall into with mentors that come in and out of the classroom, which is, it's good. We're definitely moving in the right direction, but we need more personalized attention for every teacher. We keep talking about personalized learning for students. We need that for teachers too. And I got an email this morning about a PD that I have to attend on Monday. It's a whole school-wide thing, and I'm just thinking, oh my, I don't need to do this. It's just, we can't keep doing the same thing for every teacher. And the evaluation systems need to be there to help us understand where personally I need to improve and what areas I can focus on. And we're getting there, but we're just not there yet. And unfortunately, being one of the higher performing teachers in my building, I get less attention than almost every other teacher. And that it does not make me improve the way I probably should. Now, I'm very driven, so I am constantly looking for ways to improve myself, but I should be able to have the support of my administration as well, and that's where we need to go.
So, Tim, let's talk a little more about the Measures of Effective Teaching project, because we funded that originally to make sure that there was sort of fair and respectful ways of looking at the whole of teachers' practice. And, from the Gates Foundation's point of view, we can say, wow, that had some influence and it was a great piece of research. But more importantly is how you viewed it as someone in the field. How'd you experience that? Do you think it had influence? Did it influence your own work at TNTP?
I think it was the most important piece of teacher research that's been done in the last generation, by far. And I think there isn't a close second place, because it asked a series of questions that it would have taken the field collectively a generation to answer in a piecemeal fashion. What we usually get is one paper on one topic that looks at one thing, and then somebody a couple years later builds on it with another paper. And instead, this was a rare instance of a coherent vision that asked a bunch of questions at once and therefore gave us a bunch of answers at once. And some of those questions were things like, if you measure teachers in multiple ways, do those things point in the same direction? We really didn't know before. If you test student learning with multiple kinds of tests, do they give you similar answers about how much students are growing? We didn't really know. One of the other huge ones is, how good are students at assessing the performance of their teachers? And you've seen some of these amazing students that we have had up there today. It turns out an untrained fourth grader is an exceptionally good judge of classroom performance. I mean, that is, seriously, think about this for a second. We train administrators for hundreds of hours, and we send them in there with clipboards to do what the observations that Kelly was talking about. And honestly, a lot of the time, the teacher gets very little information, and we get very little information. And thanks to, again, folks in this room, Rob Ramsdell is here, who helped design the student surveys. You put a survey in front of a bunch of fourth graders, and what they tell you is as valuable as all the king's horses and all the king's men. Met showed us a bunch of those things, and I think we'll probably talk about how these things affected policy and practice, but it was a big bang moment where all of a sudden we had this enormous harvest of information that clarified our understanding of effective teaching.
So Kelly, you've been in Hillsborough, and that's one of the districts among some others and some charter schools that sort of courageously stepped up and said, okay, we need to kind of both help with this research, but also help figure out what the system looks like after that. Mm-hmm. And a moment ago, you described a little bit about how it affected you personally. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw happen across the system, both the powerful positive things, but also where the real challenges were and maybe continue to exist?
With any evaluation, teachers tend to be a little nervous. We get a little scared. We don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've noticed as an instructional coach. I work with 24 math teachers in my department, and we have hundreds of teachers in our building, but we're not accepting it the right way. We're looking at it as a punishment, or we're looking at it as being scared, or they're going to ding me on points. But really, it's not that at all. We need to approach it differently. We need to roll it out differently so we feel supported and understand that this is for us. As a teacher, I cannot go into that classroom and not get better. You have to get better every single day. It is for the students, and that's what's being missed in this evaluation. No matter what evaluation system you decide to take on, whether it includes student surveys or not, you have got to accept the fact that it's for you as a teacher to get better, and that's what's missing. But I have to say, after several years of going through this evaluation system and working with some teachers in my department, we're starting to see a small shift. Teachers are starting to accept the fact that there's going to be people in their rooms all the time, they're going to be evaluated, and that it can be a positive. Now, trust is very tricky with the people who are coming in, because most of the time we don't even know the evaluators that are coming into our classroom. That can be a good or a bad thing. For me, I look at it as an opportunity to have one more set of eyes to help me grow in my practice, but not everyone thinks that way. And that's where we have to go. We have to really allow teachers to take control of their own teaching skill set and make the decisions that they need to make with the evaluators there to support them. And I'm starting to see it little by little, and it is really exciting as an instructional coach to see that happen, but it just needs to happen on a bigger scale.
So, Tim, since 2009, there's been a lot of policy change in the country around teacher feedback and evaluation. And, you know, not without its controversy. And you heard Bill this morning talk a little bit about what he's observed and what we as a foundation have observed and sort of our aspirations and the disconnects that we continue to see. But what do you see out there? I mean, where's it, are you worried about the quality of implementation, and what are the 2 or 3 things you worry about the most? Where are you seeing it going well, and where are you seeing it, or how are you seeing it done poorly?
Of course I'm worried about the quality of implementation. I bet everybody in the room is, and I think it is true that this whole transitional process, I think, is often framed in policy-centric terms, possibly because a lot of the folks that are in the room that have these conversations are policy-oriented people. But we didn't have a teacher policy problem. We had a classroom culture of teaching and learning problem, and policy was one small part of that. I think policy can send powerful signals about what's important to us. It can often point us in the right direction. But the issue in 2009 or in 2000 or in 1990 was not that, like, we just hadn't flipped the right policy switches to make instruction better. We have a very decentralized system nationally, and our teaching and learning culture is not as vibrant as we want it to be. It is not self-mending when instruction is not what we want it to be. We do not have a strong culture of noticing instruction that is boring and soul deadening for kids, and also when we don't have a culture of noticing when we are not helping teachers to grow over time. I think that implementation right now is still at the front end, which is we are introducing the policies and people are still getting acclimated to the water of the new policies. We are so far from driving this sort of cultural change that will make instruction consistently different over time. And I think my biggest fear is that people over-describe this as a policy debate, because it's easy to say, here's the people that were for it, here's the people that were against it, here's who's winning the debate so far, here are the people that are changing their mind about it. At the classroom level, though, I think it is a very different conversation. And from an implementation standpoint, there is a lot of agreement about the kind of instruction we want. There is a lot of agreement that we're pretty far from that. I think there is a lot less know-how about how we're going to get from here to there. I think it's strange that we talk so little about that, the cultural change, and that we tend to kind of take what I think of as the easy way out, which is like, let's throw rocks at each other about the policy.
Yeah. So Kelly, pick up on that, because you are now actively, as an instructional coach, trying to help people make that shift every day, right? And to get to that level of implementation. How are you helping teachers change their practice, you and other coaches? And what do you have to say to those of us in the room about what we need to be thinking about and doing in order to exponentially advance coaching and feedback in the country?
There are 2 things that come to mind. So the first is the actual content knowledge of our teachers is lacking. We have an extreme problem with that. So as an instructional coach, that's partly what I do. I work with my math teachers to make sure they understand the content that they're going to be teaching. The other thing is working on their actual practice, which takes a lot of time. And it can't be done in PLC meetings that are once a month. It can't happen. There's not enough. So we're constantly trying to battle the lack of time that we have. We've come up with a really unique system for planning days in which, for instance, Algebra 2 teachers all test on the same day. So we get them substitutes, and they spend the entire day with me planning out the whole next unit. So they have openers, they have questions, they have writing prompts that they can use with their kids. They have the lesson plans. We model the lessons, because you would not be surprised how many teachers have not even gone into another classroom before. I worked with 2 gentlemen last year. It was their 9th year of teaching, and they had never seen another teacher teach and did not go through a traditional teaching program. They were alternative certified. And it's not to say they can't do it, but they didn't even know what it could look like, and that was part of the problem. So as an instructional coach, that's my job to expose them to what's really out there. What can they become? Because they're only looking at what they're doing now, and if they're beating the other teacher in their test scores, oh, I'm good. But that's not the truth. We can be better, and we need to be better for our students. So that's kind of my role. It is very challenging, because you have teachers with a lot of experience who were very good teachers with the older standards. But now we're making this huge shift, and it's finally getting into the high schools, and they don't understand what Common Core, or in our case, FSA standards are. They don't understand what the difference is. They can read them, and all they see is, okay, I need to cover 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 in this section, and then I need to go on. But that's not what it is. We need to teach conceptually. And so that's also taking a lot of time. And it's important for the coaches and the mentors to be there to help guide the teachers, especially those with lots of experience who don't want to make a change. They're not ready or comfortable to make a change. Because it is uncomfortable. Learning is uncomfortable. And we need to share that with our students, but also with our teachers.
So I'm just marveling at the passion with which you are, because I think we all feel that, and it's so important for teachers and those who are working with them to come from that kind of a perspective.
And it's a battle. I mean, teachers, they get frustrated, they look at their scores and they get down, but it's always trying to look at the little pieces that we can improve on. We don't need to improve everything. Let's just start with one little thing and then move on to the next and then on to the next. And I think when you see them get overrun with evaluators, mentors, peers, all these different people who want to give them input, they get so overwhelmed. Let's start with one thing that we find important and let's go that route and start having them see success, because that's what's going to keep them in the classroom. I know my teachers are not happy at the moment, and I'm trying desperately to keep them in the classroom. We've already lost 2 teachers in our math department this year. I can't lose any more. I'm going to go crazy. You know, it's just, we need them there. They need to understand how to do it, and that's going to take time. And like you said, it's going to take a lot of passion from the people that are around them.
And the challenges are huge, but not so much that we can't overcome them.
Right.
In many ways.
Yes, they are overcomable. It's just going to take time.
Yeah. So you, both of you heard this morning, Bill, reaffirm our commitment to this agenda and continue to describe our work as wanting to see every student in the country meet high expectations, and that those expectations become a common language in many ways for teachers, to give teachers the kind of meaningful feedback that really does lead to improvement, and then to give them the tools and techniques and support and the connectedness and time they need to do that improvement. How are you, in your individual roles, helping people make connections between those things? Because I think over and over in the country, we often, work on an isolated piece, and for teachers in particular, the connections among those things are hugely important. How are you seeing that play out in your own work and perhaps in that of others?
The last project that I did when I was at TNTP was a big study of basically how to help teachers, called The Mirage, that came out this summer. And I kept reflecting on that when Bill was talking this morning, because he was basically saying this stuff is not progress if we are not helpful. And we kept asking ourselves that question over and over again, like, what if the help isn't helpful? And we, as a kind of, I'll use the term chattering class, we talk all the time about the importance of supporting teachers and helping them, and it's sort of like a feel-good statement. But then there was almost no follow-up to say, is our help helpful? Do teachers appreciate it? Is it something that they can use in their classroom, and do they get better over time? And it just kind of haunted us, because to use us as an example, at TNTP, we trained teachers for 15 years. And we had all those meetings that Kelly was talking about, like, get everyone in the room and take our help, and it's going to be great, and it's going to help you thrive because we know best. And I think that it at least brought us to a point where we confronted this vast overconfidence that we have the answers for teachers, and if they just follow our recipe, we're going to make things better for teachers, and that's going to make things better for students. I kept thinking about that because that is a challenge for us. It is not for teachers to figure out how our help can be helpful for them. And that's a challenge I think that we have not yet risen to. We saw over and over again that teachers are making big time investments. They believe that they are getting better, sometimes because we're telling them that they're getting better, but the results don't look better. And I think that is the place where, if we're going to double down on something, it is to be honest about that evidence of help being helpful, and to rededicate ourselves to getting that right, instead of to what I think we did too much of, I'll say personally, which is talk about getting it right.
And I think that teacher responsibility is extremely important in what you were saying, is that teachers really need to feel like they chose what they want to improve on, that they chose based on their students' data. But what I'm seeing is that teachers don't even know how to collect the data. They don't know how to use formative assessments in their classroom the right way to extract what they need. So we've got a lot of different issues where we need to attack that and look at lesson plans and talk about, okay, well, how do you know your kids are getting it? Because it's the same thing. How do you know teachers are getting it? So we really have to look at it on a personalized level. And I think that's where I come in. That's where other PD things come in. That's where the MET project came in. That's where the application for the Fishman Prize for me came in, and that was very important.
So where do you go to personally, and where do you send other teachers to in terms of information or tools and supports to improve your practice? And who do you, and again, I think you can speak for a larger group of teachers. Who do you trust to help you with that?
The trust part, it can be difficult. I would love to go to, my administrators are very good, don't get me wrong. I would love to go to them for instructional help. I just know they don't personally have the time. My evaluators have changed almost every year. Some of them I know personally, some of them I don't. So the trust kind of depends on if I know them or not, unfortunately, and how I know they performed in the classroom. But as far as what I look for, what I send other people to look for, is definitely doing observations. Get in the classroom of someone that you know is performing at a high level. You need to see them teach and talk to them. Because just going isn't enough. There has to be some sort of debrief afterwards where you can ask questions, they can ask you questions, and you can collaborate. You know, we need to be focused more on books, like Teach Like a Champion. We're doing a book study on that in my school. There's all sorts of resources out there. You just have to find the right one for the right teacher. For me, it's having a coach. I'm a coach, but I still have another coach that works with me. And she pushes me in ways that aren't always the most pleasant. She says things that I don't always agree with. But it's helped me become better at my job as a teacher and as a coach. You know, it's all about being uncomfortable, but knowing that in the end, you're going to be better at your job. So we got to find resources, whether it be videos online. I've shared videos with my teachers. We've watched videos together. We've videotaped themselves, which is a struggle to get people to do that. But we videotaped them and analyzed it together. So there's tons of different ways to do this, but every teacher is so different that we need somebody to work with them to identify what is going to work best for them.
So what keeps, you know, again, you've heard us a little bit today talk about what's keeping us in this work. What's keeping each of you in this work?
I think firstly, we now have a generation of teachers who are doing the things that we had dreamed of 10 years ago. And we're talking about the fact that that's not every classroom and not every child will succeed until it is. But there are now classrooms in pretty much every city that you can visit where you walk in and like, boom, immediately you see stuff happening. And there are things in front of kids that wouldn't have been there 10 years ago, really challenging material that kids are rising to meet. I think that is exciting, that there are those first glimmers of this transition becoming more complete, and they're not in just the usual suspect places anymore, which is also interesting. I think connectivity has helped teachers in some, you know, there are teachers that are scanners that find this stuff, and it's extraordinarily fulfilling when you see it, and the kind of inspiration that kids take from that, from the way they see themselves when they do things successfully that are challenging, it's amazing.
I can totally second that. It's my students, without a doubt. That's what keeps me here. And they are such amazing young individuals, and they don't even know it. And that is such a struggle for me throughout the years to get them to communicate, to understand, to talk, and to see how worthy they are and how smart they can really become if they work hard. And having, I've taught algebra up to all the way to AP Calculus, and to see the success from our lowest students to our highest students is amazing. And that is truly what, I keep doing that, is truly what keeps me doing what I do, because I can't do it without them. They're the best part of my day. When they do something they never thought was possible, or get into a university they never thought was possible, it brightens me up. I can't be more happy when I see my students succeed.
One really last quick one or two word answer. Piece of advice for us or for people in this room.
Talk to teachers. You need to talk to them.
Spend less time watching what teachers do and more time looking at what they put in front of kids.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.